welcome to another InventRight TV show. My name is Andrew Krauss. I co-founded InventRight with Stephen Key over 21 years ago, and we've been coaching and mentoring inventors ever since. We've had students in 65 countries, and we have 12 coaches. And one of those amazing coaches is Matthew Palmer. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
So, hey, before we got started here, you and I were talking about the things that people think are the hardest things aren't necessarily the hardest things. And one of the things we were discussing was people think that filing a PPA is going to be so hard. And we were talking about how really the sell sheet is harder for most people. People struggle with different things. All students are unique. Why is the PPA not as hard as people think it is?
Well, because, one, we have a ton of great training material with our program here at InventRight. And one of the training tools we have is called SmartIP. And SmartIP is, I'm what some people would call a quote-unquote a fanboy of SmartIP. I absolutely love it because there's a decent amount of things you kind of need to remember to ask yourself when writing a PPA. But SmartIP has all that criteria for you.
Nice. And
you just kind of watch some videos of Gene Quinn kind of laying out the path and asking you questions. And as long as you can answer questions with putting some decent thought into it, it's pretty much a breeze writing it. And then we've got a great video that walks you through the process of filing. So I always tell people the PPA is not hard. It may be tedious, may take a little bit of time to do, but it's not difficult to do.
Right.
Now getting into sell sheets, I think what gets people, first of all, in general, I don't think sell sheets are hard. But in the beginning when you're learning, I think what catches people off guard is they think they've got it all figured out, and then they find out real quickly they don't. Even if you've learned a lot from just various videos that you've seen and whatnot and everything, there's a lot of little tips and tricks that you get over time through experience.
So why don't they have it figured out? Did they not look at similar products to kind of like just change up what somebody else is doing a little bit? Because you don't always have to recreate the wheel, right? I mean, sometimes the product's somewhat in the same space. You're going to use some same words. Oh, I like that picture. Yeah, my product's different, but I like that product shot. That's how they relay this type of automotive product or kitchen gadget. Is it that they haven't really looked at the other products enough and kind of copied something somewhat similar?
Yeah, it can be that. I mean, there's a lot of different things, right, with sell sheets, right? You've got different types of sell sheets. So that's the first thing, right? You need to understand which type you're going to be
Let's talk about that
doing.
a little bit. Talk about the different
Sure.
types that you. Yeah.
So you want me to elaborate a little bit more about it?
You got
like
storyboard, and then you
sure,
got,
okay, yeah. So you got standard, problem solution, and storyboard. Standard is pretty effective for almost any product because it's the advertising that everybody's used to already. You see it everywhere. It's all over packaging, a beauty shot of a product and some benefits to the side, and that's standard. It's usually just looking at the product. It's very obvious what the benefit is just by looking at it. And versus like problem solution, I tell people to go with problem solution when it's very obvious when you put it right next to the problem how significant the solution is.
Is it usually problem solution is usually two pictures, same size? What do you usually do there?
Yeah, same size or right above each other. They can be to the left on your cell sheet, so when you're looking head on to the cell sheet, they can be on kind of the left side, or they could be like stacked, like one problem on the top and the solution right below it.
Yeah.
But I actually prefer them on the bottom, where the problem's to the left and then the solution's to the right. Mm-hmm. And usually there's a nice red X kind of indicating that that's the problem, and a nice green check mark indicating it's the solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's very effective for getting people to just instantly understand, like, wow, why would I want that?
So this sounds pretty simple. Why, on an emotional side or just a learning side, why do our students struggle with that, and how do you guide them? What's the struggle?
One of the big struggles that I run into a lot is, especially when somebody comes to me with a sell sheet, is they'll be like, doesn't it look great? And visually, like aesthetically, usually it does look great visually, aesthetically, but there's so much more to it, Andrew, than just it looking good graphically. I'll also notice some stuff that does look great. I'll also be like, it's pretty cluttered. There's a lot of stuff on here. There's a lot going on. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what's wrong with that? And I'm like, well, one of the problems is if there's a lot going on, you can get anxious looking at it. It's like a psychological thing, and people don't really pick up on that. And that's where that experience thing comes in. Over time, you learn this stuff. But, that's the last thing you want to do is overwhelm your potential licensee and have them be like, you know what, I'm done looking at this. There's too much going on. You want them to just very quickly understand the product. I tell people, to me personally, an effective sell sheet is less than 5 seconds you understand the product and what the benefit of it is. And one of the ways to do that is to keep it very simplified. But people have a very hard time doing that with something they're so passionate about. And they often think this is their one opportunity to tell everything about their product, and this is the only chance they're going to get.
Do you relay to your students that they don't have time to click on a website, enter a username and password? They have time to look at a PDF or a short video and give it about 5 seconds. Is that hard for people to accept, that the marketing managers at these companies, that's all they're going to give it? And that's why they want to throw the kitchen sink. Oh, no, I want to give it to all of them because they're going to look at it. And we know that they won't.
Well, I'll speak to that for a second, Andrew. I think a lot of my students, they're surprised to kind of hear that, what you just said. Like, hey, they're only going to give this like maybe a minute or something. And they're like,
a minute would be great. Well, if you don't get past the first 5-6 seconds, then you get to the minute. Otherwise, you get nothing.
Exactly. So but they're like, well, why? Why is that? And I'm like, because they're busy people. They have multiple things going on with their position. And depending on the industry, more than likely, there is not an individual whose sole job is to review ideas. So that's why you have to capture their attention very quickly and very effectively, so that you can get into those initial interest conversations as they come later. But if you don't have the right material, it won't matter. And that comes back to that experience thing. And that's what I think is so great about our coaches here is they've seen what works and they've seen what doesn't work, and so we can guide somebody with what they have. And a lot of times, like I said, sometimes they come to us with no sell sheet at all. Sometimes they come to us with a sell sheet. And quite often when they come with a sell sheet, I'll let them know, I'll be like, hey, full disclosure, this is constructive criticism. We're going to have to chop a lot off of this. But I like where you're going overall. So let's do a combination of what you're going for
or not.
What's effective. Yeah,
or not. Sometimes it's so horrendous. You just got to say, this is not. We just got to start over.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's judgment call too, right? What's going to take longer to just do some edits on this, or to just start completely over? It just depends.
How serious do you take helping your students with sell sheets? I know it's.
I think it's absolutely critical, because and so I do take it very seriously. I even do like a little template with my students. I'll be like, let's just get the raw content figured out before we even do the media stuff, because you got to have the right wording. Otherwise, none of the pictures are going to matter. They go hand in hand, but we got to start somewhere. But I do take it very seriously, because if you don't have that effective sell sheet and effective one-line benefit statement with your sell sheet, you're not going to get in the door to go any further. So it's all like hypothetical and hopeful and everything. But if you gonna do it on this part, you're gonna be in trouble. So I think we spend a decent amount of time just making sure that is just right, before we move forward, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if a student makes 30 phone calls and nobody's showing interest because the sell sheet sucks, like that's a big waste of your time, right?
Absolutely.
Very, very important.
And it's interesting you say that too. Once you get into companies, I often tell students, take feedback about your sell sheet specifically with a grain of salt. Hear it a couple times before you decide you're going to change it, because remember how much time and effort and thought went into making it. Don't let one individual say one thing about your sell sheet and then you go, oh, now I have to change it, because guess what? You'd be changing it over and over.
Well, if you look at it and you're like, wow, I totally missed that. That totally makes sense, maybe. But you're absolutely right. If 3 people tell you that, then you're like, okay, there's obviously something I didn't connect with people on this.
Sure. Absolutely.
one thing that I always say to inventors is you want that sell sheet not to be for the company, but for their customers. So you want them to be very reactive, look at it and go, oh, if my customer saw this, I would want it. You know, yes. They would want it. And
sure.
That you know, not, oh, we're going to make $1 million, oh, if we only get 2% of the market, or giving them industry statistics and stuff.
Well,
do you want
to telling them, like your logistics are going to be easier if you get my product? Like, it's such speculation, and they're quite often the potential licensees like, how would you know? You know, like how and that's another thing. Sometimes I notice it's interesting you say that. So like sometimes I notice some of the key benefits that my students will come up with. It's almost like they're inviting somebody to challenge it, and I'm like, you don't want those. You don't want those type of benefits. You know, you want benefits that are very agreeable and help people to see the benefit of it all, but not things that invite challenges.
Yeah, you want to think 2 steps ahead. Like if I saw this for my first time, I'd have this thought, oh, but it's addressed right down here, or it's addressed with the picture, or it's addressed whatever. And so you want to kind of think ahead. What are their concerns? What are their criticisms? And like address them quite often. Maybe some of them not, but the major ones that would prevent them from showing interest.
Sure. Yeah. So there are some benefits. Like for instance, like when you're looking at a product, sometimes you might think to yourself, if I don't say this though, they may assume this. So so you need to, and that's a kind of a special benefit that sometimes can be challenging. You were talking about the challenge of this. That can be challenging for some people to address that without being overly obvious they're addressing it. You want to paint the picture that it's a benefit when you're addressing it, and that's where your coach can really come in and help you with that stuff too.
And sometimes that would be integrated in the sell sheet, and sometimes you maybe put a sentence or two in the email that you're submitting along with the sell sheet.
Absolutely.
To address it. You know, you might have seen this type of product before, but this is different because of this, and it might intrigue them to take a closer look anyway. But doing a preemptive strike on something that may get you a no as opposed to interesting is a good thing. But you can get ridiculous with it too.
Sure.
Just on the critical stuff, I think.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and you know, one-line benefit statements go hand in hand with sell sheets, and those are very important. You know, somebody asked me how important is this really, and I was like I've used it in the subject line and gotten a licensing deal because of it. It's pretty important.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
it is.
So you know, and I when I'm working on my sell sheets with my students, I kind of work in tandem on the one-line benefit statement at the same time. Because when you kind of realize your key benefits, that can also help you to further realize your one-line benefit statement. Yeah. Not always. Sometimes your one-line benefit statement is the ultimate benefit of your product, and it's different than your other key benefits. But sometimes your key benefits ultimately add up to that ultimate benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matthew, thank you for coming on. It's a real nice insight into how our coaches work with our students. But if you never become an InventRight student, this information that Matthew shared with you is still going to be super helpful. So that's what we're doing in this series. Coaches are sharing things that our students are struggling with and how we solve those problems. A lot of mindset stuff, sometimes emotional stuff, dealing with fears. It's all over the map. But thank you, Matthew. You're a great coach. Thank you for being part of the team, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on, Andrew.
All right, take care. Keep inventing, everyone. We'll catch up the next time. See you guys. Bye.
There's a great idea in each of us. But it's truly magical to see it come to life. Sharing your creativity with the world has never been easier. We can help.